Greetings, Lore Masters. Tonight our chronicle covers the artifacts that shatter the boundaries of balance. Items so potent, so infused with raw, magical dominance, that they turn the harsh, unforgiving province of Skyrim into a playground for the godlike. We aren't just talking about a slightly sharper sword or a sturdier breastplate. We're talking about weapons that drink souls, armour that defies the laws of Aetherius, and spells that make the destruction magic of the College of Winterhold look like parlour tricks performed by a drunk novice. Imagine standing atop the throat of the world, the biting wind whipping through your fur armour, the aurora borealis painting the sky in ribbons of emerald and violet. You feel the weight of destiny, sure, but mostly you feel the biting cold and the threat of a frost troll lurking just around the bend. Now imagine holding a weapon that renders that troll, and indeed Alduin himself, trivial. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive a trip to Cold Harbour without some serious enchanted gear, or at least a very fast pair of boots. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, go ahead and drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see who is awake with us in the wee hours. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Dragonborn stands at the precipice of the ratway in Riften. It is not a place of glory. The air here is thick, humid, and carries the copper tang of blood mixed with the musty rot of stagnant water. It is a place where the desperate go to hide and the foolish go to die. But hidden within these dank, dripping tunnels, past the vagrants and the skeletal remains of those who took a wrong turn, lies a vault. And in that vault rests a relic that does not belong in the mortal plane, nor does it seemingly belong in the balanced economy of warfare. We begin with the Blade of Duality, the shifting hunger known as Duskfang and Dawnfang. For the uninitiated, or those who perhaps spent too much time wandering the ashlands of Solstheim and missed the whispers in the rift, this weapon is a relic of the Shivering Isles. It is a piece of the Mad God's realm made manifest in Nirn. The Dragonborn discovers this through a trail of notes, a quest titled A Soul Divided, which is a fitting name for a weapon that cannot decide what it wants to be, only that it wants to feed. The journey to claim it is surprisingly humble. It doesn't require slaying a dragon priest or navigating the labyrinthian ruins of Blackreach. It involves navigating the Ratway vaults, fighting through a spectral guardian who wields the blade with a ferocity that suggests he is not merely protecting it, but is enslaved by it. The ghost of Lorant acts as the final barrier, a tragic figure bound to the blade's curse. When the Dragonborn finally prise the artifact from the ectoplasmic grip of its former master, the true nature of the weapon reveals itself. A core fact that every adventurer quickly realizes, often to their delight and their enemies' horror, is the blade's unique metamorphic property. The sword is quite literally a slave to the clock. From the hours of 6 AM to 6 PM, the weapon glows with the fiery orange of the sunrise. This is Dawnfang. It burns with incendiary fury, searing flesh and setting Draugr ablaze with every swing. But as the sun dips below the horizon and the moons Massa and Secunda take their vigil, the blade shudders, the metal twists, and the orange hues cool into a deep malevolent violet. It becomes Duskfang, dealing frost damage that saps the stamina of foes, freezing them in their tracks. It is 2 legendary artifacts for the weight of 1, a frantic shifting of elements that ensures no resistance is ever permanent. But elemental damage alone does not break a world. Fire and frost are common enough in the hands of any adept spell sword. What elevates Duskfang and Dawnfang into the realm of the absurd is its hunger. The blade keeps count. It is aware, omniscient regarding its own carnage, omni-observant of the lives it ends. If the wielder manages to slay 12 enemies, a trivial task when delving into a bandit-infested fort or a farmer hive, the blade awakens further. It does not just burn or freeze, it begins to siphon the very essence of the victims. This is the bloodthirst mechanic. Once that 12th soul is claimed, the weapon grants the wielder an absorption ability. Dawnfang will absorb health, turning the Dragonborn into an unkillable vampire warrior who heals with every slash. Duskfang, in its nocturnal misery, absorbs magicka, allowing a spellser to cast infinite destruction spells without ever pausing to quaff a potion. This creates a gameplay loop that fundamentally breaks the resource management aspect of combat. Why carry healing potions when your sword drinks the life of your enemies? Why worry about magicka regeneration when the night itself fuels your spells? The Dragonborn becomes a perpetual motion machine of death, fueled by the very enemies trying to stop them. The aesthetic of the blade is unmistakably Akaviri in design, yet twisted by the chaotic influence of the Shivering Isles. It features a jewelled hilt that seems to watch the user, an eye that opens and closes, mimicking the duality of the blade itself. The lore surrounding its creation is steep and troubled. It is widely understood that the Tsaisi, the snake men of Akavir, had a hand in the design of such weapons, prioritizing elegance and lethality. However, an obscure lore tidbit that often goes unnoticed by those who simply swing the sword is found in the journals of the unfortunate souls who sought it before the Dragonborn. The blade was originally associated with the Grom, a servant in the Shivering Isles during the Grey March. But more specifically, the Nerncrux-style casing and the sentient nature of the enchantment imply that the sword might effectively be a lesser Daedra, forced into the shape of a weapon, a living entity condemned to eat forever but never grow full. The implications of bringing such a weapon into Skyrim are terrifying. In the Shivering Isles, madness is the norm. Physics and logic are merely suggestions. But in Skyrim, a land of dirt, snow and civil war, the blade is an anomaly. It cuts through the gritty realism of the setting. When a bandit in fur armour charges the Dragonborn, he expects cold steel. He does not expect a weapon that shifts from fire to ice based on the time of day and eats his soul to heal his killer. There is a fascinating debate among the community regarding the canon status of this weapon's appearance in the Fourth Era. Fans still argue vehemently whether the sword was physically brought from the Isles by the champion of Cyrodiil, who, as we know, ascended to become Sheogorath, or if the mad god simply got bored and tossed it through a portal into the ratway just to see what would happen. Some theories suggest that the ghost guarding it was a manifestation created by the sword itself to ensure it only fell into the hands of someone capable of feeding it properly. The idea that the sword chooses its wielder by orchestrating the death of the previous one adds a layer of sinister intelligence to the item. It isn't just a tool, it's a parasite seeking a more efficient host. The gameplay breakage is palpable. Typically, Skyrim balances combat by forcing the player to manage health, stamina and magicka. You power attack, you lose stamina, you cast, you lose magicka, you get hit, you lose health. Duskfang and Dawnfang bypass this economy entirely. With the absorption enchantments active, the Dragonborn can stand in the face of a dragon's breath swinging wildly and out-heal the damage being dealt. It removes the necessity for tactical retreat. It removes the fear of death. Furthermore, unlike many other enchanted weapons that require constant recharging with soul gems, the bloodthirst mechanic is self-sustaining in a way that feels unintentional by the divines. While the elemental charge needs maintenance, the absorption, the part that makes you immortal, is a reward for killing. It incentivizes a hyper-aggressive playstyle that turns the slow, methodical combat of Skyrim into a fast-paced slaughter. The Dragonborn stops blocking, they stop dodging, they simply advance, a whirlwind of orange and violet consuming everything in their path. As the Dragonborn emerges from the ratway, the sun beginning to rise over the autumn trees of the rift, the blade in their hand shifts. The cool violet glow of the night sizzles and pops, replaced by the angry orange hum of the dawn. The blood on the blade boils away instantly. There is no need to wipe it clean. The sword is ready for a new day of feeding. And as the guard at the city gate remarks, steel is good, but that looks like madness. He has no idea how right he is. The balance of the world has shifted. The Dragonborn is no longer just a hero. They are a conduit for a hunger that is ancient and alien, and this is only the first of the artifacts we are uncovering. The ratway was dark, yes, but at least the darkness there was natural. Where we are going next, the darkness is not just an absence of light. It is a presence. It is a shadow that has weight, a shadow that whispers, and a shadow that has a name. The dawn breaks, but for the wielder of this blade, the cycle of feeding never truly ends. It merely changes temperature. The concept of breaking the game here is subtle at first. A free heal, a free spell, but as the kill count rises, the realization sets in. You're not playing by the rules of Nirn anymore. You're playing by the rules of the Shivering Isles, and in the Isles the only rule is that power is yours if you're mad enough to take it. If the shifting colours of Dawnfang represent the chaotic mania of Sheogorath, then the artifact we turn to now represents a far colder, more focused form of madness. It is a madness born not of whim, but of hunger. Pure, unadulterated, sentient hunger. We leave the humid tunnels of the ratway and the colourful skies of the Shivering Isles influence behind, trekking into the snowy crags of the Rift's mountains. Here, hidden away in a Nordic ruin ominously named Champion's Rest, lies a weapon that doesn't just break the game's combat mechanics, it threatens to break the law of the universe itself. We're speaking, of course, of Umbra. For veteran adventurers who walked the roads of Cyrodiil during the Oblivion Crisis, the name Umbra conjures memories of a formidable Bosmer warrior, standing vigil in an Ayleid ruin, or waiting for a worthy death. But in Skyrim, through the vile Whispers creation, the sword has returned and it has brought its baggage with it. The Dragonborn finds the ruin of Champion's Rest silent, save for the hum of magical resonance. Entering the depths isn't like raiding a bandit camp. It feels like walking into a tomb that is still holding its breath. The core in-game fact here is stark. Umbra is not merely a sword, it is a boss fight. You don't find this blade in a chest or loot it off a Draugr Deathlord. You have to fight its previous owner, or rather, the shade of its previous owner to claim it. The final chamber of Champion's Rest is an arena of spectral purple fire, where the Dragonborn faces off against the shadow of Umbra. This entity wields the blade with terrifying proficiency, immune to damage until you solve a puzzle involving crystals and light, forcing the player to engage with the dungeon's mechanics while dodging swings that could cleave a giant in two. It's a rite of passage. The sword demands you prove you are stronger than the ghost it has already consumed. Once the shade is banished and the blade is yours, the game changes. In your inventory, Umbra looks like a sleek black greatsword with a design that screams malice, but it's the enchantment that shatters the balance of Skyrim's economy. Umbra comes with a permanent soul trap effect on every single strike, alongside absorb health and absorb stamina. Let's pause and consider the utility of that. In the base game, filling soul gems is a chore. You need a spell or an enchantment with a timer, and you have to kill the target within that window. It's a logistical hassle that interrupts the flow of combat. Umbra removes the hassle. Every swing that kills fills a gem. You become a walking industrial complex of soul harvesting. The economy of enchanting, usually gated by the scarcity of filled gems, collapses. You have infinite fuel. You can enchant 1,000 iron daggers, level your enchanting skill to 100 in an afternoon, and break the Septim economy by selling them all to Belethor, who will probably buy them just to get you out of his store. But the breakage goes deeper than just soul gems. The swing speed of Umbra is faster than a standard greatsword. It swings with the speed of a one-handed weapon in some iterations of the game's code, or at least feels significantly lighter, allowing for a damage per second output that rivals crafted Dragonbone gear. When you combine high base damage, health absorption that keeps you alive, stamina absorption that lets you power attack indefinitely, and a swing speed that catches enemies off guard, you have a weapon that renders tactical combat obsolete. You don't need to block, you don't need to dodge, you just feed the sword. Now, here is where the lore gets murky and fascinating. An obscure lore tidbit that many players gloss over in their rush to swing the Black Blade is the origin of Umbra's sentience. This isn't just a Daedric artifact gifted by a prince, it is a piece of a prince that went rogue. As detailed in the novels The Infernal City and Lord of Souls, Umbra was originally created by the witch Naenra Ware at the request of Clavicus Vile. Vile wanted a sword that could steal souls, but the witch tricked him, as witches in these stories often do, and a piece of Vile's own power was imbued into the blade. This gave the sword a mind of its own. It eventually cut away a portion of Clavicus Vile's power to create a rogue entity, Umbra, which then sought to escape its creator. So when the Dragonborn holds Umbra, they aren't holding a tool, they are holding a sentient shard of a Daedric prince that hates its dad. The sword whispers. In Oblivion, it drove its wielder, Umbra, the Bosmer, to lose her identity completely. She ceased to be a person and became merely the vessel for the sword. In Skyrim, the creation content alludes to this with the ghost in Champion's Rest. The previous adventurer didn't die of old age, they were hollowed out. This leads to a massive community debate that still rages on forums and lore videos. Is the Dragonborn immune to Umbra? Fans argue that because the Dragonborn possesses the soul of a dragon, an immortal shard of time, a child of Akatosh, their soul is too large, too powerful, or simply too divine for Umbra to consume. The sword eats mortal souls, white and black souls, but a dragon's soul? That might be like trying to swallow a star. Some theories suggest the Dragonborn is the only being in existence capable of safely wielding Umbra, because they are, in essence, a dominate will that supersedes the sword's hunger. Others take a darker view, suggesting that the Dragonborn we play as in the late game, the one who slaughters towns for fun and hoards cheese wheels, is actually the result of Umbra's subtle corruption. The player's desire for higher stats and more loot aligns perfectly with the sword's desire for more souls. Perhaps we aren't resisting the sword at all, perhaps we are just a very, very effective puppet. Visually, the sword is stunning. It absorbs light rather than reflecting it. In the dark corners of a dungeon, it looks like a hole in reality. Walking into a tavern with Umbra on your back makes a statement. It says, "I have been to places where the light does not reach, and I brought a souvenir." The guards might comment on your curved swords, but they stay silent about the black blade, perhaps out of an instinctual fear. The integration of Umbra into the game's progression is where the breaking feeling truly settles in. Normally, acquiring a Daedric artifact requires a high level or a difficult quest. Champion's Rest is challenging, yes, but accessible relatively early if you know what you're doing. A level 10 character who manages to cheese the boss fight walks out with an endgame weapon. From that point on, bandits, dragons, and vampires are just fodder. The tension of survival evaporates. You are the predator. There is a quiet horror in using Umbra. You strike a bandit and the soul trap sound effect triggers, that sharp, tearing noise. You know that bandit isn't going to the Dreamsleave or Sovngarde. They are going into a gem in your pocket to be used to recharge a staff you'll never use. It's industrial, cold, and efficient. The sword encourages this. It rewards you for treating living beings as batteries, and let's be honest, you probably enjoy it. The convenience of never buying a soul gem again is worth a little moral ambiguity, right? As the Dragonborn leaves Champion's Rest, the snow is falling harder. The ghost of the previous champion is gone, finally at peace, or perhaps just obliterated into nothingness. The weight of the sword on your back feels reassuring, but also heavy. Heavier than steel should be. You check your map. You have souls to claim. The sword seems to hum in anticipation, vibrating against your armour. It knows that as long as you are the Dragonborn, there will be conflict, and where there is conflict, there is a feast. But while Umbra dominates the physical realm with the brute force of a great sword, there are other ways to break the world. Some methods are less about the weight of the swing and more about the precision of the cut. Some artifacts don't want to eat the world, they just want to burn a path through it. And for that, we need to look toward a weapon that has been defined not by its hunger, but by its history of betrayal and golden fire. We turn our eyes from the shadows of the rift to a legend that has passed through the hands of champions and traitors alike. A blade that proves that sometimes the most broken things in Skyrim are the ones that shine the brightest. Leaving the cold, soul-sucking void of Umbra behind, we trade the shadows for something far brighter, far hotter, and infinitely more elegant. If Umbra is the heavy, brutal executioner's axe of the Daedric arsenal, this next artifact is the scalpel. If a scalpel were made of solid gold and perpetually on fire, we are heading north, towards the icy coastlines where the wind cuts like a knife, to uncover a weapon that doesn't just cut, it cauterizes. We are talking about Goldbrand. Now, for those of you who spent hundreds of hours in Morrowind or Oblivion, seeing Goldbrand in Skyrim is like running into an old college friend who got incredibly fit and rich. It's familiar, but it commands a new level of respect. This isn't just a sword found sticking out of a rock. This is the legendary katana of Boethia, the Daedric prince of plots, conspiracy and treason. And getting it involves a quest, a matter of pride, that digs surprisingly deep into the political history of the Fourth Era. The journey begins not with a whisper from a statue, but with a dead body. As most good Skyrim stories do, you stumble upon the remains of a Penitus Oculatus agent, the Emperor's personal secret service. This sets you on a trail involving a cultist named Sivda and a hidden tomb near the Cecellum of Boethia. The atmosphere here is distinct. It's not the dusty, cobwebbed feel of a Draugr crypt. It's the tense, frantic energy of a cultist hideout where zealotry has replaced reason. When you finally claim the blade, the first thing you notice is the aesthetic. It is a katana. In a land of heavy iron broadswords and crude steel axes, a katana stands out. It screams Akaviri, it screams outsider, and it screams lethality. The blade glows with a subtle, pulsating golden light, a stark contrast to the grey and white palette of Skyrim's landscape. But let's talk about why it breaks the game. Goldbrand deals a staggering 30 points of fire damage per hit. To put that in perspective, a standard enchantment at a moderate level might give you 10 or 15 points. Goldbrand doubles that right out of the box, and because it is a katana, it swings faster than a standard sword. The math here is terrifyingly simple. High swing speed multiplied by high elemental damage equals a damage per second output that melts health bars before the enemy can even draw their weapon. The break comes from how this elemental damage interacts with Skyrim's perk system. If you take the Augmented Flames perk in the Destruction tree, Goldbrand's enchantment scales. Suddenly you aren't just swinging a sword, you are swinging a flamethrower. Frost trolls, usually the bane of early game adventurers with their regenerative health, become trivial. 1 slice, and their regeneration halts. 2 slices, and they are panic burning. 3, and they are ash. It turns the terrifying predators of the north into kindling. Here is the core in-game fact that grounds this weapon. Goldbrand is canonically associated with great champions who shape history. In Oblivion, it was the reward for a brutal tournament of champions. In Skyrim, the Creation Club content reveals that this specific blade was wielded by Emperor Titus Mede II himself during the Great War. This brings us to our obscure lore tidbit, one that reframes our entire understanding of the man we meet in the Dark Brotherhood questline. We often think of Titus Mede II as a tired, resigned old man waiting to die on his boat, the Kataria. But the lore introduced here tells us that during the Battle of the Red Ring, the pivotal battle that allowed the Empire to retake the Imperial city from the Thalmor, Titus Mede II wasn't just commanding from the back. He was on the front lines wielding Goldbrand. He was cutting through lines of Altmer spellzords with a Daedric artifact, turning the tide of the war with golden fire. It paints a picture of a warrior emperor that the base game never showed us, adding a tragic weight to the blade. You're holding the weapon that saved the Empire, even if only temporarily. This revelation has sparked a significant fan debate regarding the nature of the weapon's abandonment. Why would the Emperor leave such a powerful artifact in a dusty Nordic tomb? The community speculates that Boethia, being the Prince of Plots, is fickle. The theory goes that Goldbrand is only loaned to champions who have a destiny to fulfill, specifically a destiny involving violent upheaval. Once the Battle of the Red Ring was won, Titus Mede II's role as a warrior was over. He became a politician, and Boethia has no use for politicians who sit in chairs. So, the blade left him, or he was compelled to hide it away, knowing its hunger for conflict would destabilize his reign. Some fans even argue that the Emperor's resignation to his assassination in the main game is because he knows he no longer has the favour of the artifacts that once made him invincible. Without the gold, he's just a man. Mechanically, wielding Goldbrand feels almost like cheating, especially against vampires. Skyrim is full of vampires. Dawnguard made sure of that. Vampires have a crippling weakness to fire. Taking Goldbrand into a vampire lair is like taking a spotlight into a dark room. It ruins everything for the inhabitants instantly. The 30 points of fire damage bypasses their natural resistances and triggers their vulnerability multiplier. You walk through Castle Volkihar not as a guest but as a walking sunrise. There is also the matter of the Eltenbrand Easter egg, a topic that old-school loremasters love to whisper about. In Morrowind, there was a convoluted way to turn Goldbrand into Eltenbrand, a direct reference to an obscure developer joke involving basketball stats, NBA player Eltenbrand. While this doesn't appear in Skyrim mechanics, the community debate often circles back to whether Eltenbrand is a canonical separate artifact or just a fever dream of the Nerevarine. The fact that Goldbrand in Skyrim is so serious and steeped in the lore of the Great War seems to finally put the Eltenbrand jokes to bed, treating the sword with the reverence it deserves as a tool of empire building. Visually, the particle effects on the blade are mesmerizing. When you block, the fire flares up. When you strike, it leaves a trail of embers in the air. In first-person view, exploring a dark cave, you don't even need a torch. The sword lights your way. It creates a sense of safety that is deceptive. You feel safe because you can see, but you are also a beacon. Every enemy knows where you are. But with Goldbrand, you don't care. Let them come. They are just moths flying into a very sharp lantern. The broken aspect is solidified when you realise that, unlike many enchanted weapons, Goldbrand has a very generous charge meter. It doesn't run out after 10 hits. It keeps burning. It feels efficient, reliable, almost industrial in its ability to process enemies. You stop looking at health bars and start looking at the beautiful burning animations. As you sheathe the katana, the golden glow fades slightly, but the heat remains. You can imagine the heat radiating through the scabbard, keeping you warm in the biting winds of Winterhold. It's a comforting thought. You aren't just a wandering adventurer anymore. You are the successor to the Emperor's war prowess. You hold the fire that retook the White Gold Tower. But fire, for all its glory, is loud. It draws attention. It is a weapon of the visible world of wars and battlefields. Sometimes, to truly break the game, you don't need to be the brightest thing in the room. You need to be the thing that isn't in the room at all. You need to erase yourself from the narrative entirely. We leave the heat of the golden flame and step into the cool, silent embrace of the shadows. We are moving from the weapon of a warrior emperor to the tool of a master thief. A tool so potent that it doesn't just hide you. It rewrites history so that you were never there to begin with. The fire of Boethia gives way to the cloak of Nocturnal. We step away from the blinding golden light of the Emperor's katana and slip into something far more comfortable, far quieter, and infinitely more dangerous to the social order of Skyrim. While Goldbrand breaks the game by melting health bars, our next artifact breaks the game by dismantling the very concept of consequence. We are leaving the battlefield and entering the shadows of the Thieves' Guild, but not the damp cisterns of Riften you're used to. We're talking about a legend that transcends the guild itself. We're talking about the Grey Cowl of Nocturnal. For any aspiring thief or agent of chaos, this is the Holy Grail. It isn't just a piece of armour, it is a permission slip to commit atrocities and walk away whistling. The quest to find it, appropriately titled The Grey Cowl Returns, begins not with a bang, but with a subtle theft. It leads the Dragonborn on a chase across Skyrim, deciphering clues left by a mysterious figure claiming to be the Grey Fox eventually, culminating in a journey to a forgotten ancestral tomb. The atmosphere here is thick with nostalgia for the Oblivion Crisis, filled with nods to the legendary thieves of the Third Era. When you finally descend into the crypt and retrieve the cowl from the bust of the Grey Fox, you aren't just picking up a helmet, you're picking up a mechanic that fundamentally rewrites the Skyrim penal code. Here is the core in-game fact that makes this item completely broken. The Grey Cowl separates your criminal identity from your civil identity. In the base game, if you steal a sweet roll in Whiterun while seen, the guards know it was you. If you run to Solitude, the bounty might not follow immediately, but your reputation does. You are a criminal. The cowl changes this binary. When you equip the cowl, you become the Grey Fox. Any crime you commit, theft, assault, murder, lollygagging, is attributed to the Grey Fox. The moment you unequip the cowl, you are the Dragonborn again, a celebrated hero with a clean record. This allows for a gameplay loop that is hilariously broken. You can put on the mask in the middle of the Blue Palace, swipe the Jarl's dinner right off her plate, stab a rude court wizard, and then duck behind a pillar. You take the mask off, step out and ask the guards, "My goodness, who was that terrible masked man?" And they will answer you without a hint of irony. They will search for the Grey Fox while you, the actual perpetrator, stand there eating the stolen sweet roll. It removes the risk from the risk versus reward equation of thievery. It turns the entire province into an all-you-can-steal buffet. But the breakage goes beyond just bounties. The cowl comes with a permanent Detect Life enchantment. Now, usually Detect Life is a spell that drains your magicka rapidly. It's a tactical tool you use for a few seconds to check a room. The cowl gives it to you for free, forever. This changes the visual language of the game entirely. You stop seeing the world as a collection of textures and lighting. You start seeing it as a collection of glowing auras. You see the heartbeat of every guard through the walls. You see the sleeping vampire in the coffin before you even open the door. It grants you a level of omniscience that feels almost unfair. You are never surprised. You are never ambushed. You are the one who knocks, because you know exactly who is on the other side of the door. Furthermore, the Cowl grants a massive boost to carrying capacity, 200 points to be precise. This is the feather effect from previous games, acknowledging that a master thief needs deep pockets. In a game where inventory management is the true final boss, this effectively removes the burden of choice. You don't have to decide between the heavy dwarven plate and the enchanted glass bow. You take both. You take everything. You become a vacuum cleaner for loot. Now, for the lore masters, there is a fascinating, obscure lore tidbit buried in the history of this item that makes its presence in Skyrim deeply ironic. The original curse of the Grey Cowl, as seen in Oblivion, was tragic. The wearer was erased from history. To wear the cowl was to be forgotten by everyone you ever loved. Your name was stricken from the records, and even if you stood in front of your spouse without the mask, they wouldn't recognize you. The curse was stolen from Nocturnal by the thief Ema Deraloth. However, at the end of the Oblivion Thieves Guild questline, the champion of Cyrodiil uses an Elder Scroll to break this curse, allowing the identity of the Grey Fox to coexist with the identity of the wearer, Count Corvus Umbranox. So, the version we find in Skyrim is the fixed version. It retains the power to obscure identity. The guards see the fox, not you, but lacks the tragic, history-erasing curse that ruins your life. It's the ultimate version of the artifact. All of the benefits, none of the existential dread. However, this leads to a robust community debate. Fans argue whether the cowl in Skyrim is actually the original cowl of Nocturnal, or if it is a powerful replica created by a master enchanter who revered the Grey Fox. The argument stems from the fact that Daedric artifacts are known to change shape and power level between games. Some theorize that Nocturnal, being the mistress of shadows, wouldn't allow a fixed version of her artifact to exist without a catch. Perhaps the catch is that by wearing it, you're slowly mantling the Grey Fox persona. The theory of mantling in Elder Scrolls lore suggests that if you act like a figure enough, you become them. By wearing the cowl and committing crimes, are you just playing a game, or are you becoming the avatar of theft itself? The guards don't just see a mask, they see a legend, and legends have a way of consuming the people who try to live up to them. There is also the shadow of the fox theory. Notice how the ghost of the Grey Fox guides you. In the quest, some believe that the persona of the Grey Fox has become a separate entity, a shadow that lives in the cowl, guiding the hands of whoever wears it. You aren't the thief, the cowl is the thief. You're just the vehicle. Visually, the cowl is iconic. The leather texture, the Daedric script etched into the brow, it reads "Shadow hide you," and the way it covers the upper face while leaving the mouth exposed for a cheeky grin. It clashes with almost every armor set in the game, which is perfect. It's not meant to match, it's meant to stand out to the player while blending into the lore. The impact on the game's economy is devastating. With the cowl, you can clean out the display cases of the East Empire Company in Solitude, sell the goods to a fence, which the creation often provides access to via the Thieves Guild callbacks, and become the richest being in Tamriel within a week. Gold becomes meaningless. You can buy every house, bribe every guard, and hire every mercenary. You have achieved chim through capitalism, but the most entertaining way the cowl breaks Skyrim is the sheer audacity it permits. There is a specific kind of joy in walking up to Nazim, slapping him, and then vanishing into the Grey Fox persona before the guards can draw their swords. It allows the player to act out their intrusive thoughts without saving and reloading. It turns the rigid law and order of the hold capitals into a farce. As you slip the cowl off your head, the glowing auras of the living fade back into normal vision. The world looks mundane again. The guard walking past you nods respectfully, addressing you as Thane. He has no idea that the sweet roll in your pocket was his lunch. The cowl rests in your inventory, a heavy, leather-bound secret. It whispers to you that laws are just suggestions for people who don't have the right accessories. But while the Grey Cowl allows you to bypass the laws of man, there are other artifacts that allow you to bypass the laws of magic itself. We leave the shadows of the thief and move towards the light of the paladin. We are trading the leather mask of a criminal for the gleaming blade of a holy warrior. A weapon so defensive, so attuned to the rejection of sorcery, that it turns the most terrifying mages of Skyrim into helpless children. The thief hides from the fireball, the paladin simply walks through it. We step out from the shadows of the Grey Cowl, where morality is flexible and laws are mere suggestions, and into the blinding, righteous light of the paladin. If the Cowl is the tool of the trickster, our next artifact is the shield of the holy warrior. Except it isn't a shield at all. It is a sword that thinks it's a wall. We're heading to the Dragon Priest dungeon of Forelhost, a place usually reserved for high-level frustration, to recover a blade that turns the most terrifying mages in Skyrim into harmless children throwing sparks. We are talking about Chrysamere. Now, usually playing a two-handed warrior in Skyrim is a high-risk venture. You trade defense for damage. You can't hold a shield, so when a dragon breathes fire or a necromancer hurls an ice spike, you just have to take it on the chin, or rather, on the breastplate. You rely on your health pool and your prayers, but Chrysamere, known colloquially as the Paladin's Blade, and historically as the Sword of Heroes, shatters this trade-off completely. The quest to find it, the Lost Paladin, takes you to the Forelhost Refectory. There, you don't fight a lich or a Daedric prince. You fight the Lost Paladin himself, a nondescript warrior who hits like a freight train. When you finally pry the sword from his cold hands, you realise why he was so hard to kill. The core in-game fact that defines this weapon is its unique defensive enchantment suite. Chrysamere grants 15% fire resistance, absorbs 10% of magicka from incoming spells, and, here is the game breaker, grants a passive health regeneration effect that works during combat. Let's unpack that last part because it fundamentally breaks the rules of Skyrim's combat engine. In the base game, your health regeneration slows to a crawl the moment you enter combat. It's a mechanic designed to force you to use potions or restoration magic. Chrysamere ignores this rule. It forces your health to regenerate at a steady clip even while you're actively swinging the sword. You become a troll in plate armor. You don't need to pause to heal. You don't need to chug a potion every time a bandit sneezes on you. You just keep fighting, and your health bar keeps ticking up. Combined with the absorb magicka effect, this turns the Dragonborn into the ultimate anti-mage weapon. Picture this. You're charging a master necromancer. Usually this is a dance of death, where you dodge ice storms and lightning bolts. With Chrysamere, you just walk forward. The lightning hits you, and instead of draining your health, it refills your magicka bar. The fire hits you, and you shrug it off. You reach the mage, who is now panicking because his stronger spells are just feeding you, and you introduce him to the concept of two-handed power attack. The visual design of Chrysamere is understated but elegant. It lacks the jagged edges of Daedric weapons or the over-designed filigree of elven gear. It looks like a simple, heavy steel claymore, with a distinctive circular guard and ancient runes etched down the centre. It looks like a weapon meant for work, not for show. It has a weight to it that feels reassuring. When you block with it, a subtle ward appears, a visual cue that you are protected by more than just steel. Now, for the lore masters, there is a juicy, obscure lore tidbit about Chrysamere that explains why you find it on a lost paladin. Unlike Daedric artifacts, which are bound to the will of a specific prince, Molag Bal, Mehrunes Dagon, etc., Chrysamere has no master. It is an orphan artifact. In the Elder Scrolls, Arena and Daggerfall, it was often associated with the Eternal Champion, but the lore consistently describes the blade as fickle. It doesn't stay with one hero for long. It abandons its wielder the moment they become complacent or unworthy. This creates a darkly funny narrative for the lost paladin you killed. He didn't lose the sword. The sword likely let him die because it was bored. It sensed the Dragonborn, a more potent vessel of violence, entering the ruin and decided it was time for a management change. You aren't the chosen one, you're just the current temp agency for a sword that has abandonment issues. This leads to a fascinating community debate regarding the nature of the blade's sentience. Is Chrysamere alive? Fans argue that because it isn't Daedric, it might be Erdric in origin, perhaps a creation of Stendarr or Zenithar. However, Erdric artifacts are rare and usually don't have a mind of their own. The theory that gains the most traction is that Chrysamere is an egonymic artifact, an item that has absorbed so much heroic intent over thousands of years that it has developed a rudimental consciousness centered purely on the concept of heroism. It doesn't care about good or evil, it cares about action. The Lost Paladin was just standing around in a tomb. That's not heroic. So, the sword stopped protecting him. The gameplay loop with Chrysamere is intoxicatingly simple. You stop playing Skyrim as a tactical RPG and start playing it as a hack-and-slash arcade game. You don't check corners, you don't sneak, you kick down the door, scream a Thum, and let the sword sort out the details. The Absorb Magicka effect also means that if you're a spell sword, using the two-handed casting mod or simply switching between spells and sword, you have an infinite battery. Get hit by a spell, gain Magicka, cast a healing spell, swing sword. It's a perpetual motion machine of holy violence. Let's be honest, there is also something deeply satisfying about denying mages their one advantage. In Skyrim, magic is often portrayed as this terrifying, unknowable force. The College of Winterhold treats it with reverence. But with Chrysamere, you treat magic like bad weather. Annoying, but ultimately something you just put on a coat to ignore. The coat happens to be a 5-foot-long sword. The broken aspect is most evident in the late game. When fighting dragons, specifically ancient or revered dragons, their breath attacks are usually lethal. Chrysamere's enchantments mitigate this to a laughable degree. You can stand in the fire breath of a dragon, regenerate health through the damage, and then decapitate the beast when it lands. It makes you feel less like a mortal dragonborn, and more like a demigod who has transcended the need for survival instincts. There is a quiet dignity to the weapon too. It doesn't scream or whisper like Umbra. It doesn't glow with the angry fire of Goldbrand. It just hums with a steady, low vibration. It feels solid. It feels like the anchor in a storm. As you leave Forelhost, the snow crunching under your boots, you feel different. You aren't looking over your shoulder for assassins. You aren't checking your potion count. You are the wall that the world breaks against. The Lost Paladin may have failed, but you have the favour of the blade, at least for now. Just don't or stop fighting. The moment you settle down, the moment you decide to retire to Lakeview Manor and build a kitchen, that's when Chrysamere might decide to slip out of your scabbard and find someone with a bit more ambition. But while Chrysamere makes you an invincible tank, it is still just one weapon. It protects you, but it doesn't dress the part. To truly break the game, you need to look the part of a champion, specifically a champion of the Civil War. We are moving from a single blade to an entire wardrobe of destruction. We are leaving the dusty tombs of dragon priests and stepping onto the battlefield of the Stormcloaks and Imperials to claim the armour of the greatest duelists in Skyrim's history. The Paladin's blade is defensive, the champion's armour is a statement of intent, and that intent is to hit harder than anyone else on the field. From the stoic lone wolf defence of Chrysamere, we march straight into the chaotic heart of Skyrim's defining conflict. We leave the dusty isolation of Forelhost and step onto the bloody snow of the Civil War. But we aren't here to debate the merits of the White Gold Concordat or argue about religious freedom. We are here for the spoils of war. Specifically, we are here for 2 sets of armour that make the standard issue gear of the Legion and the Stormcloaks look like cardboard cosplay. We are talking about the Civil War champions. This Creation Club content introduces a quest, Battle of the Champions, which sounds grand and heroic, but let's be honest. For the Dragonborn, it's a shopping trip. The premise is simple. The war has stalled, as it always does until you get involved, and both General Tullius and Ulfric Stormcloak have decided to settle things the old-fashioned way. A duel between chosen champions. The Dragonborn naturally gets to participate or just watch, and loot the bodies. The fight takes place in the snowfields near Whiterun, a secluded spot where 2 warriors clad in legendary gear are preparing to beat each other into history. The core in-game fact here is the gear itself. The Imperial Champion wears the Imperial Dragon Armour, a set of heavy plate that gleams with the polished discipline of Cyrodiil. It is refined Romanesque and screams authority. The Stormcloak Champion wears the Stormbear Armour, a barbaric masterpiece of fur, iron and hatred. It looks like someone skinned a bear and then taught the bear how to be a tank. What breaks the game isn't just the aesthetic upgrade, it's the stat block. These armour sets are available relatively early in a playthrough, essentially as soon as you can survive the fight against the champion of the opposing faction. However, the armour rating on these pieces rivals, and in some cases exceeds, Ebony and Daedric gear. Let that sink in. You can be level 10, walking around in armour. It usually requires you to be level 30 or 40 to even find in a loot chest. You become a walking fortress in the early game. Bandits with iron swords might as well be hitting you with spoons. But the true breakage lies in the enchantments. Normally, finding a piece of armour with 1 good enchantment is a win. These sets come with dual enchantments on almost every piece. The The Imperial Dragon chess piece, for example, increases your health and your heavy armor skill. The gauntlets increase your one-handed damage and your block effectiveness. This is the kind of synergy you usually have to grind your enchanting skill to level 100 to create yourself. The game hands it to you on a silver platter or a bloody snowbank for winning a single duel. This creates a power spike that flattens the difficulty curve of the mid-game. You don't need to level smithing, you don't need to scour vendors for boots of hauling. You just put on the Stormbear set, which boosts your two-handed damage and stamina, and suddenly you are one-shotting Draugr Deathlords who are technically 5 levels higher than you. It trivializes the resource management aspect of the game because the gear covers all your bases: offense, defense, and stats. For the lore enthusiasts, there is a fascinating, obscure lore tidbit hidden in the design of the Imperial Dragon armor. If you look closely at the helmet and the chest detailing, it strongly resembles the armor worn by the Imperial Legion in the Elder Scrolls IV, Oblivion, specifically the high-ranking officers and the Imperial Watch. But more importantly, the dragon motif is traditionally reserved for the Emperor and his personal guard. The fact that a mere champion is wearing this implies that General Tullius pulled some serious strings back in Cyrodiil. He didn't just equip a soldier, he requested gear from the Imperial armory that might have once belonged to the Blades or the Dragon Guard. It suggests that the Empire takes the Stormcloak Rebellion far more seriously than Tullius lets on. He's not just fighting a local uprising, he's deploying assets meant for protecting the Ruby Throne. On the flip side, the Stormbear armor connects deeply to the ancient Atmaran totem worship. Before the Nords worshipped the 9 divines, or 8 if you ask the Thalmor, they worshipped animal totems. The bear was one of the most prominent, representing Sun, the god of trials against adversity. By wearing this, the Stormcloak champion isn't just representing Ulfric, they are invoking the ancient pre-imperial gods of Skyrim. It's a theological statement stitched into leather and iron. This leads to a spirited community debate about the canon Dragonborn and their involvement in the war. Fans often argue that wearing either set of armour effectively declares a canon allegiance for the last Dragonborn. If the Dragonborn wears the Imperial Dragon armour, they are visually aligning themselves with the legacy of Tiber, Septim, who was also Dragonborn. It fits the narrative of restoring the Empire. However, others argue that the Dragonborn is a chaotic, neutral entity who wears the armour of whichever side lost the duel simply because it has better stats. There is a popular theory called the War Profiteer theory. It suggests that the Dragonborn's true role in the Civil War isn't to pick a side, but to consume the power of both. By killing the champion of one side and looting the other, the Dragonborn effectively ends the concept of champions altogether. They become the only champion. The duel was supposed to settle the war, but instead it just armed the Dragonborn. The war continues, but now there is a third party wandering the battlefield who is harder to kill than a dragon. Visually, the contrast is stark and satisfying. The Imperial set reflects light. It shines in the sun, making you a beacon of order. The Stormbear set absorbs light. It looks matted and rough, blending into the tundra. It allows for a level of role-playing depth that the standard studded armour versus Imperial light armour choice never offered. You actually look like a general or a warlord. And let's not forget the weapons that come with these champions. The Imperial champion wields a sword and shield that are equally overtuned, while the Stormcloak carries a warhammer that feels like it weighs as much as a small car. The Akaviri influence on the Imperial sword connects back to our earlier discussion of Goldbrand. It seems the Empire has a stockpile of Akaviri-style weaponry that they only break out for special occasions. It reinforces the idea that the Empire is a cosmopolitan machine, drawing on cultures from across Tamriel, while the Stormcloaks are hyper-focused on their own frozen backyard. The broken feeling really sets in when you take this gear into other quest lines. Walking into the Thieves Guild in full Imperial Dragon armour feels ridiculous, like a tank trying to sneak, but walking into a dragon fight feels correct. The armour rating is so high that you can ignore the iron flesh spells or the need for a shield. You become a juggernaut. There is also a cheeky irony in the fact that you can wear the armour of the faction you're actively fighting against. You can join the Stormcloaks, kill the Imperial champion, wear his armour, and then march into the Palace of Kings to report to Ulfric. The game doesn't have a mechanic for Ulfric to say, "Why are you dressed like a general of the Legion?" It breaks the immersion in a funny way, but it also highlights the Dragonborn's unique position. as a being who exists above the petty squabbles of the mortals. You wear the enemy's skin as a trophy, and no one dares to question you because you can shout them apart. As you stand over the defeated champion, stripping the armour from their body in the freezing wind, you realise that the civil war has just become very profitable. The ideals of the Stormcloaks and the Empire fade away, replaced by the tangible weight of enchanted steel. You are now the best-dressed warrior in Skyrim. And in a land where reputation is everything, looking the part is half the battle. The other half is having an armour rating of 400 at level 15. But while armour protects the body and swords cut the flesh, there are tools that touch the very fabric of divinity. We are leaving the mundane politics of the Civil War behind. We are delving deep into the lost history of the Dwemer to uncover tools that were designed not for war but for apotheosis. We are going to find the instruments that once tried to build a god. We leave the snow-covered battlefield and descend into the steam-filled ruins of the Deep Folk. We are trading the steel of emperors for the brass of engineers who mocked the gods. We leave the bloody snow of the Civil War behind, where men fight for the right to sit on a throne of wood and stone. We are descending into the earth, into the steam-choked history of a race that didn't just want to rule the world, they wanted to dismantle the divinity that created it. We are trading the clumsy steel of the Empire and the Stormcloaks for the precise, tonal brass of the Dwemer. We are going to find the tools that were designed to build a god. We are talking about Sunder and Wraithguard. For lore enthusiasts, these names carry a weight that few other artifacts can match. These are two of the 3 legendary tools of Kagrenac, the instruments used to tap into the heart of Lorcan, the heart of the world itself. In Morrowind, these tools were the key to destroying the false gods of the Tribunal and the terrifying Dagoth-Ur. In Skyrim, they return via the Legends Lost quest, which sees the Dragonborn retracing the steps of a doomed caravan to the Sightless Pit, one of the most notoriously easy to fall into and hard to get out of dungeons in the game. The quest culminates in the Sightless Vault, a location that hums with the same strange energy as the Red Mountain. Here, you don't fight a typical boss, you fight the Messenger, a corrupted shade that feels less like a bandit and more like a glitch in the system. But the reward is worth the headache of navigating the Falmer-infested tunnels. The core in-game fact that breaks the balance of Skyrim is the sheer statistical density of these items. Let's start with Wraithguard. In a game where resistance slots are precious, Wraithguard is a cheat code. It is a heavy armour gauntlet that provides a 10% resistance to fire, frost, shock, magic, disease and poison. Read that list again. Usually you need a ring for magic resistance, a necklace for disease immunity, and boots for fire resistance. Wraithguard condenses an entire wardrobe of defensive enchantments into a single hand slot. It frees up your ring, necklace, and chest piece for offensive enchantments. It is the ultimate slot efficiency item. Wearing it makes you statistically 10% harder to kill by anything in the game that isn't a physical sword. And because it counts as a Daedric artifact in terms of armour rating, despite being Dwemer in origin, it offers top-tier physical protection as well. Then there is Sunder. If Wraithguard is the shield, Sunder is the nuclear option. It is a one-handed mace, but it hits with the weight of a collapsing star. Its enchantment deals 5 points of fire, 5 points of frost, and 5 points of shock damage simultaneously, along with 15 points of stamina damage. On paper, 5 points sounds small, but because it deals all 3 elemental types at once, it bypasses almost every resistance in the game. A Dark Elf resists the fire but takes the frost and shock. A Nord resists the frost, but burns and convulses. There is almost no enemy in Skyrim that is immune to Sunder. Creates a chaos damage effect that shreds through health bars. But the real break comes from the synergy. The tools are designed to work together. If you wield Sunder without Wraithguard, the weapon fights you. It drains your stamina and slows your swing, a mechanical nod to the lore that these tools are too powerful for mortal hands. But when paired with Wraithguard, Sunder becomes weightless. The stamina drain vanishes, replaced by a sense of fluidity that allows for infinite power attacks. You become a whirlwind of tonal violence, smashing enemies with a hammer that was once used to rewrite the laws of reality. Now, for the obscure lore tidbit that adds a layer of cosmic horror to your new toys. The tools of Kagrenac are not just enchanted weapons, they are tonal tools. In Elder Scrolls lore, the universe is a song. The Orbis! Magic is just altering the notes. The Dwemer didn't use magic. They used tonal architecture to alter the sheet music Sunder was designed to produce a specific tone that would make the Heart of Lorkhan tangible, while keening, the third tool available in the base game but weaker without the set, was used to cut it. The obscure fact here is found in the journals of the Legends Lost quest. The caravan that was transporting these tools wasn't just moving cargo, they were being driven mad by the resonance of the items. The tools sing to each other. Even separated by miles, Sunda and Wraithguard call out. The messenger you fight isn't just a guardian, he is a victim of this song. He has been hollowed out by the tonal frequencies of the hammer, turned into a drone. It implies that by carrying these items, the Dragonborn is subjecting themselves to a constant, low-frequency hum that eventually drove an entire race to disappearance. You aren't just carrying a hammer, you are carrying a radioactive isotope of sound. This brings us to one of the most heated debates in the lore community, the right versus left Wraithguard. Controversy. In Morrowind, the Wraithguard given to the Nerevarine by Vivec was a right-handed gauntlet. However, if the player killed Vivec, they could loot a unique Dwemer artifact which, with the help of the last living dwarf Yagrum Bagan, could be jury-rigged into a usable Wraithguard. This jury-rigged version was for the left hand. The Wraithguard found in Skyrim is for the right hand. This has led to wild speculation. Is this the original Wraithguard that Vivec held? If so, how did it get here? Did the Nerevarine leave it behind before sailing to Akavir? Or is this a third Wraithguard? Some fans theorise that Kagrenac, being a master engineer, would have created backups. The idea that there are multiple sets of tools floating around Tamriel terrifies lore scholars, because a single set was enough to delete the Dwemer. If there are spares, then the potential for another Red Mountain event is always present. Others argue that the distinction is a gameplay oversight by Bethesda, but lore fans hate the word oversight. They prefer Dragon Break. They argue that during the Warp in the West or the Red Year, timelines merged, and perhaps the left and right gauntlets are simply different manifestations of the same concept, protection against the divine. Mechanically, wielding Sunda and Wraithguard changes the rhythm of combat. The sound design for Sunda is heavier, deeper than other maces. When it hits a shield, it sounds like a bell tolling. It feels industrial. You aren't a warrior, you're a demolitionist. You're taking apart the enemy defense the way a worker takes apart a wall. The breakdown of game balance is most evident when you fight mage enemies. The 10% magic resistance from Wraithguard, combined with the Breton racial ability or the Lord Stone, can push you near the magic resistance cap effortlessly. You can walk through a storm of ice spikes, approach the caster, and hit them with a hammer that disrupts their magicka flow via the shock damage and drains their stamina. You completely shut them down. It's a hard counter to the entire magic system, and let's not forget the sheer style. The Dwemer aesthetic is unique, brass, geometric, timeless. Wearing Wraithguard with a set of dwarven plate makes you look like a centurion that learned how to shout. It's a look that says, I value science over magic, and I have a very large hammer to prove it. As you stand in the sightless vault, the steam hissing from the pipes, Sunda heavy in your hand, you can almost hear the echoes of the Dwemer. They vanish trying to use these tools to become gods. You're using them to kill bandits and dragons. It feels like a misuse of power, like using a nuclear reactor to toast bread. But then again, the bread comes out perfectly toasted every time. The Dragonborn is not a tonal architect. We are not trying to build the new medium, we are just trying to survive. And if survival means using the tools that broke the world, so be it. The hammer falls, the enemy breaks, and the song continues. But while the Dwemer tools rely on the cold logic of engineering and tonal manipulation, there are other ways to break the rules of reality. Some methods are less about science and more about raw, unfiltered destruction. We are leaving the brass tunnels of the deep and heading back to the surface, to open books that contain spells forbidden by the College of Winterhold. We're about to look at magic that doesn't just damage enemies, it erases them. We are turning the page to the Arcane accessories. We step out of the steam-choked mechanical precision of the Dwemer ruins and into the crackling, chaotic air of pure magicka. If Sunda and Wraithguard represented the triumph of engineering over divinity, our next entry represents the triumph of raw power over game balance. We are heading to a location that every aspiring mage knows well, yet often overlooks until it's too late: Hobbs Fall Cave. We're here to uncover a library of spells that shouldn't exist, spells that make the Archmage of Winterhold look like a hedge wizard performing card tricks. We are talking about the Arcane accessories, Now, usually playing a pure mage in Skyrim is a lesson in humility. At high levels, your destruction spells scale poorly. A master level spell takes 3 seconds to cast, leaves you stationary, and barely tickles an ancient dragon on legendary difficulty. You run out of magicka, you run out of potions, and you eventually resort to conjuring a Dremora Lord to do the heavy lifting, while you hide behind a rock. But Arcane Accessories introduces a suite of spells that flip this script entirely. The quest, the Lost Library, is deceptively simple. You find a note, you go to a cave, you find a chest. But inside that chest is a collection of tomes that fundamentally break the math of Skyrim's magic system. The core in-game fact that shatters the meta is the existence of the elemental line of destruction spells: Elemental Flare, Elemental Bolt, Elemental Burst, and the king of them all, Elemental Blast. These spells are not just fireball but green. They are dual elemental projectiles. Elemental Blast, for instance, deals both fire damage and shock damage in a single cast. On paper, the base damage is already higher than the vanilla Incinerate or Thunderbolt, but the breakage happens in the perk tree. Because the spell carries tags for both fire and shock, it benefits from both the Augmented Flames and Augmented Shock perks in the Destruction tree. Let's do the math. If you take both ranks of Augmented Flames, 50% boost, and both ranks of Augmented Shock, 50% boost, the damage of Elemental Blast doesn't just add up. In many calculations, it multiplies or applies the bonuses sequentially to the respective damage components. You end up with a spell that costs less magicka than a standard expert spell, but deals nearly triple the damage. This trivializes Master and Legendary difficulty, a Draugr Deathlord that usually takes 5 Incinerates to kill. One Elemental Blast turns him into a ragdoll. The shock component drains their magicka, preventing them from shouting or casting, and the fire component applies a burning damage over time effect that also scales with your perks. It is the most efficient magicka to damage ratio in the game's history. You become a walking artillery cannon, but it doesn't stop at projectiles. The pack also introduces unbounded spells. Unbounded Storms is perhaps the most visually spectacular and mechanically abusive spell in the game. It surrounds the caster in a localized lightning storm that strikes random enemies within range for massive damage per second. Here is the game-breaking exploit that players discovered. The game engine calculates damage over time based on active frames. If you cast Unbounded Storms and then fast travel while holding the casting buttons, the game thinks you are casting the spell for the entire duration of the travel time. If you fast travel from Riften to Solitude, the game calculates hours of casting time and applies that damage to everything in your path, or loads the hits upon arrival. While this is a glitch, the intended use is just as broken. You can simply walk through a dungeon with the spell active, and enemies drop dead before they can reach you. It's microwave combat. You cook the room. Now, for the obscure lore tidbit. The quest, the Lost Library, implies that these tomes are not new inventions, but recovered relics from a time when magic was far less regulated. The chest is often associated with the frantic scribblings of an apprentice who sought power beyond the curriculum of the college. But the specific nature of elemental magic, mixing fire and shock, harkens back to the chaos magic theories of the early First Era, or perhaps even the chaotic Chrysamere of the Dawn Era. In standard Elder Scrolls magic theory, as taught by the guild mages, schools are rigid. Fire is fire, shock is shock. Mixing them is considered unstable and dangerous to the caster. The fact that these spells exist suggests they originate from a tradition that predates the classification of the schools of magic by Venus Galerion. They are wild magic, refined just enough to be castable, but retaining the raw, unpolished lethality of the Orbis. The College of Winterhold likely banned them, not because they were dark, but because they were too effective. If every apprentice could cast Elemental, Burst, the college would have blown itself up centuries ago. This leads to a fascinating community debate. Why is 4th Era magic so weak compared to these ancient spells? Fans argue that magic in Tamriel is decaying. In the Elder Scrolls Online, set in the 2nd Era, spellcrafting and variety were rampant. In Oblivion, 3rd Era, you could still make your own spells. By Skyrim, 4th Era, knowledge has been lost. The Lost Library supports the theory of magical entropy, the idea that as time goes on, mortals are forgetting how to manipulate the fabric of reality. The Dragonborn finding these tomes isn't just a power-up, it's an archaeological rediscovery of a lost art. Some fans take it a step further, theorising that the augmented perk synergy isn't a bug but a lore feature. A mage who understands both fire and lightning should be able to weave them together. The Dragonborn, having a soul of a dragon, creatures of dominance and power, naturally understands how to break the rules that limit normal mages. Visually, the spells are a treat. Elemental Blast looks like a comet made of magma and lightning. It illuminates dark dungeons with a harsh, flickering light that is both orange and blue. When it impacts, the sound design is a heavy, bass-boosted thud followed by the crackle of electricity. It feels impactful, it feels dangerous. Using these spells changes your relationship with the world. You stop fearing groups of enemies. In fact, you welcome them. Unbounded Freezing lets you freeze an entire room of bandits solid, leaving them helpless statues while you casually walk around looting their chests. It turns combat into a gallery visit. There is also the Paralysis rune to consider. For a mere chunk of magicka, you can place a rune that paralyzes enemies for a significant duration. In the base game, Paralysis is an expert-level alteration spell that costs a fortune. The rune version is accessible, cheap, and turns giant camps into comedy skits. You place a rune, the giant steps on it, falls over stiff as a board, and you proceed to hit him with Elemental Blast until he stops twitching. The broken nature of Arcane accessories is that it makes pure mage builds viable, yes, but it overcorrects. It makes them superior to everything else. A warrior needs to smith armor and sharpen swords. A thief needs to sneak and brew poisons. A mage with these tomes just needs to visit Hobbsfall Cave at level 1, and they have the firepower to kill a dragon priest. It removes the linear progression of the mage archetype. You start as a god. There is a distinct pleasure in walking into the College of Winterhold, ignoring Tolfdir's safety lecture, and casting a spell that deals more damage than his entire repertoire combined. You are the Archmage not because of politics, but because you found the books everyone else was too afraid to read. As you close the tome of Elemental Blast, your hands glowing with residual energy, you realise that the laws of physics in Skyrim are merely guidelines. You have found the loopholes. The fire burns hotter, the lightning strikes faster, and the magicka flows freer. You have mastered the destructive arts. But destruction is only one side of the coin. To truly break the game, you don't just need to destroy matter, you need to reshape it. You need to take the building blocks of the world, flowers, mushrooms, and salts, and twist them into potions that defy all logic. We are leaving the cave of the mage and entering the tent of the merchant. We are about to meet the Khajiit caravans, who are carrying ingredients that shouldn't exist in this province. We are about to open the satchels of rare Curios. We leave the crackling ozone of Hobbsfall Cave and the flashy destruction of the arcane accessories. We are trading the raw, explosive power of the elements for something far more subtle, far more insidious, and ultimately far more game-breaking. We are heading to the outskirts of Whiterun, or perhaps the gates of Riften, to find a tent pitched in the mud. We are looking for the Khajiit caravans. We are talking about rare Curios. At first glance, this creation seems harmless. It adds a few new ingredients to the Khajiit vendor lists, colourful mushrooms, strange roots, and bits of insects from other provinces. But veteran alchemists know that what the Khajiit are selling isn't just produce. It is the mathematical destruction of Skyrim's difficulty curve. The core in-game fact that changes everything is the magnitude multiplier. In the base game, ingredients generally have standard values. A blue butterfly wing and snowberries make a fortify enchanting potion of a certain strength. But Rare Curios introduces ingredients like druch wax and stoneflower petals. These aren't just new flavours, they possess effect magnitudes that are double the standard value. Let's explain why this breaks the game. Skyrim's crafting meta revolves around the loop. You drink a fortify enchanting potion, enchant a set of gear with fortify alchemy, put on that gear, and brew a stronger potion. In the vanilla game, there is a soft cap, a point where the numbers stop going up because the ingredients just aren't potent enough to push the math further without using glitches. Druch wax and stoneflower petals shatter this cap. Because their base magnitude for fortify enchanting is twice as high as standard ingredients, they allow you to jump the curve. You can create god-tier enchanting potions without ever needing to rely on the infamous restoration glitch. You are breaking the game legitimately. With these ingredients, you can craft a set of armor that gives you millions of health points or a wooden sword that deals enough damage to one-shot Kastag. The Khajiit aren't selling groceries. They are selling nuclear launch codes in the form of flower petals. Then there is gold canet. This yellow flower from Morrowind possesses a paralysis effect that, when combined with certain other ingredients, creates poisons with durations that last for real-time minutes. You can shoot a bandit, go make a sandwich, come back, and he will still be stiff as a board on the ground. It turns combat into a point-and-click adventure where the click is the delete button. Now for the obscure lore tidbit. The inventory of the Khajiit caravans in Rare Curios is a love letter to the geography of Tamriel. The ingredients are not random, they're invasive species. Corkbulb and marshmallow are staples of Morrowind. Flamestalk and Withering Moon come from the Shivering Isles. The lore implication is that the Khajiit caravans are actively smuggling flora from the realm of madness and the ash-choked lands of the Dunmer into Skyrim. This paints the caravans in a new light. They aren't just drug dealers peddling skooma. They are bioterrorists introducing alien ecosystems to a province that isn't ready for them. The Watcher's Eye ingredient, literally the eye of a Daedra from Hermaeus Mora's realm, suggests that the Khajiit have trade routes that go through Oblivion itself. Rissard isn't just a merchant, he's an interdimensional trafficker. This leads to a spirited community debate regarding the economy of the Dragonborn. Fans argue that the introduction of rare Curios validates the theory that the Dragonborn is the single greatest economic force in Tamriel. By buying these ingredients, crafting potions worth 5,000 gold each, and selling them back to the merchants, you create an inflation bubble that should logically collapse the Empire's currency. There is also the pay-to-win debate, since these ingredients are only available through the Creation Club, now part of the Anniversary Edition. Some purists argue that the ability to make god potions is effectively a paid cheat code. Others counter that since it requires knowledge of alchemy, and the patience to farm the caravans, often using the Save Punch Reload exploit to reset their inventory. It is a reward for the dedicated grinder. Visually, the ingredients are a stark contrast to Skyrim's muted palette. The bright oranges, purples and cyans of the rare Curios items look almost artificial against the grey snow. When you mix them, the potions don't look any different, but you know. You know that the little vial in your hand contains the power to rewrite the laws of physics. The broken aspect is finalised when you realise that these ingredients allow you to bypass the need for combat perks entirely. Who needs one-handed mastery when your sword is enchanted to deal 500 chaos damage thanks to a potion you brewed with Druch wax? You become a master of all trades not through training, but through chemistry. As you walk away from the Khajiit caravan, your purse lighter but your satchel full of alien roots, you feel a sense of superiority. The guards might look down on the cat folk, but you know the truth. The cats hold the keys to godhood, and they are selling it for 20 gold pieces a stem. But while alchemy allows you to break the game through numbers, there are forces that want to break the game through literal destruction. We are leaving the peaceful trade routes of the caravans. We are heading to the mythic Dawn, a cult that we thought was destroyed 200 years ago. They are back, and they are trying to open a door that should have stayed shut. We are about to face the cause. We leave the colourful, game-breaking chemistry sets of the Khajiit caravans behind. While alchemy can turn you into a god of numbers, there is a faction returning to Skyrim that doesn't care about numbers. They care about history. Specifically, the kind of history that involves the sky turning red, the ground splitting open, and demons pouring out to eat the world. We're trading the subtle manipulation of rare Curios for the overt, nostalgic horror of the mythic Dawn. We are entering the story of the cause, for those who lived through the Oblivion crisis, either in the lore or by playing the Elder Scrolls 4, Oblivion back in 2006. The mythic Dawn is the ultimate boogeyman. They are the cult that assassinated the Emperor, extinguished the dragonfires, and nearly handed Tamriel over to Mehrunes Dagon. In Skyrim, they were thought to be extinct, hunted down to the last member, but as the Dragonborn discovers after a sudden, unprovoked attack by a stranger, ideas are harder to kill than people. The cult is alive, they are digging, and they are very close to succeeding again. The quest leads you on a sprawling investigation that culminates in a journey to Rael, an Ayleid ruin nestled in the Geralt Mountains near the border of Cyrodiil. The atmosphere here shifts dramatically. You leave the Nordic architecture of Draugr crypts and step into the white marble and meteoric iron of the Ayleids. It's a jarring, beautiful transition that screams, "This is serious." And at the end of this dungeon, guarding a partially formed Oblivion gate, are 2 Dremora Valkin, Methats and Gatanas, wielding weapons that shouldn't be here. We're talking about Torment and Scourge. The core in-game fact that breaks the combat balance is the enchantment on Scourge. This mace, which looks like a menacing blend of ebony and daedric design, comes with a Banished Daedra enchantment that works on targets up to level 30. Let's unpack the utility of that. In the late game, or in DLC areas like Apocrypha, your most annoying enemies are often Daedra. Flame Atronachs, Frost Atronachs, Dremora Lords, and Seekers. These enemies are tanky, they hit hard, and they usually come in groups. Scourge turns them into a non-issue. You hit them once, and poof, they are sent back to the waters of oblivion. It's not just high damage, it is an instant delete button for an entire category of enemy. If you are fighting a conjurer who summons a Storm Atronach to tank for him, you simply tap the Atronach with Scourge, erase it from existence, and proceed to beat the conjurer to death with his own mistake. It trivializes one of the most dangerous enemy types in the game. Then there is Torment. This one-handed sword deals 30 points of fire damage. Similar to Goldbrand, this is a massive amount of elemental damage that scales with the Augmented Flames perk. But unlike Goldbrand, which is a katana, Torment is a Daedric sword with the weight and stagger potential to match. It hits like a truck. When dual-wielded, if you are lucky enough to get a second one via exploits or just pair it with Scourge, you become a walking apocalypse. You are banishing the summons with one hand and burning the summoner with the other. Now for the obscure lore tidbit that gives these weapons their terrifying pedigree. Scourge is not just a random drop, it is a recurring artifact with a specific purpose. In the Elder Scrolls III, Morrowind, Scourge, then known as Scourge of the Daedra, was found in the possession of Devaith Fair, the 4,000-year-old Telvanni wizard who keeps corporous victims as pets. The lore states that Scourge was originally created by the Daedric Prince Malakath, specifically to be used against Daedra. It is a weapon of irony. The fact that the mythic Dawn, a cult dedicated to Dagon, has their high-ranking Dremora wielding a weapon made by Malakath to kill Dagon's minions, is a layer of theological hypocrisy that is just delicious. It implies the Dremora are so arrogant they believe they can control a weapon that hates them. Furthermore, the quest. The cause introduces a concept called liminal bridges. The cult isn't just opening a new gate, they are trying to reopen an old one. They are harvesting the scars of the Oblivion Crisis. The lore here suggests that the barriers between worlds didn't heal perfectly after Martin Septim's sacrifice. They scabbed over, and scabs can be picked. This recontextualizes the entire setting of Skyrim. The peace we fight for is fragile, resting on a wound that never truly closed. This leads to a massive community debate regarding the competency of the Vigilants of Stendarr. Throughout Skyrim, the Vigilants are portrayed as well-meaning but ultimately useless paladins who get wiped out by vampires. In the cause, the Dragonborn effectively does their job for them, uncovering a massive industrial-scale cult operation that has been digging under their noses for years. Fans argue that this proves the Vigilants are either corrupt or functionally blind. How do you miss an excavation team trying to open a portal to hell? The debate often settles on the idea that the Dragonborn is the only competent good guy in the province, and that institutions like the Vigilants are just flavor text for failure. There is also a debate about the Deadlands biome introduced in this creation. Inside the gate you find plants like Spiddlestick and Harada, ingredients from Oblivion. Some alchemists argue that these ingredients, when combined with the rare Curios we discussed earlier, allow for even more game-breaking potions, like prolonged paralysis or massive health ravaging. It creates a closed loop where the Creation Club content feeds into itself, creating a super Skyrim meta that leaves the base game in the dust. Visually, Riel is a masterpiece of nostalgia. The Ayleid tile sets, the Welkin stones glowing blue in the dark, the Vala stones spinning in their cages. It hits a specific nerve for players who spent hundreds of hours in Cyrodiil. It feels like you have walked out of Skyrim and into a memory. And when you see the Oblivion Gate, the sky turning that signature angry red, the PTSD of the crisis hits hard. The broken aspect of the cause is narrative as much as it is mechanical. You're essentially fighting a mini DLC that has higher stakes than the Civil War. Ulfric wants to be High King? Cute. The Mythic Dawn wants to dissolve the planet. By completing this quest and taking Scourge and Torment, You are walking away with the weapons of the end times. You are carrying the tools that were meant to enslave humanity. When you wield Scourge, there is a distinct sound on impact, a hollow, magical thud that signals the banishment. It's satisfying in a way that regular combat isn't. You aren't just killing the enemy, you are evicting them. You're telling the Daedra you don't have a visa for Nirn and sending them home. As you emerge from Riel, the fresh air of the Gerald Mountains filling your lungs, you look at the weapons on your hip. One burns with the fire of the Deadlands, the other hums with the hatred of Malakath. You have stopped the crisis, but you have kept the power. The Mythic Dawn is gone, again, but their legacy is now in your hands, and frankly, they take up a lot less inventory space than an Elder Scroll. But while Daedric weapons break the game by removing enemies from reality, there are artifacts that break the game by bringing the dead back into reality, but under your total control. We are leaving the fire of Dagon and turning to the cold, rotting embrace of the King of Worms. We are about to find a helmet that turns necromancy from a forbidden art into a limitless army. We are heading to Gallows Hall. We leave the burning skies of the Oblivion Crisis and the jagged red crystals of the Deadlands behind. We are trading the fire of Daedric princes for something colder, quieter, and infinitely more disturbing. We are heading to a small, unassuming fort in the middle of Marazai Pond, a place that looks like just another bandit hideout until you step inside and realise the furniture is made of bones. We are talking about Gallows Hall, and specifically the crown jewel of necromancy, the Bloodworm helm. Now, usually necromancy in Skyrim is a bit of a letdown. You raise a zombie, it groans, follows you for 60 seconds, and then disintegrates into a pile of ash that you can't re-raise. It's messy, it's temporary, and the villagers hate it. But Gallows Hall changes the rules. The quest, Dreams of the Dead, doesn't ask you to clear a dungeon. It asks you to solve a puzzle inside the mind of a dead necromancer. You have to navigate floating skulls, decipher clues from journals of the deceased, and essentially prove that you are smart enough to inherit the title of Lich Lord. When you finally unlock the master bedroom, because apparently even master necromancers need a good night's sleep, you find the Bloodworm helm resting on a mannequin. It isn't subtle. It is literally a skull that you wear over your own face. It screams, "I have no friends, only minions." The core in-game fact that breaks the meta here is the helm's interaction with the Necromage perk. On the surface, the helm reduces conjuration spell cost by 25% and makes your reanimated minions last longer. That's good. But if you are playing as a vampire and you take the Necromage perk in the restoration tree, the game identifies you as an undead creature. The Bloodworm helm, coded with undead properties, amplifies this. Here is the math that breaks the game. The Necromage perk increases the effectiveness of all spells and effects against undead. Since you are an undead vampire wearing a helm that buffs undead interactions, every single enchantment on your armor gets a boost. Your Fortify smithing gear, 25% stronger. Your Fortify alchemy ring, 25% stronger. The helm acts as a force multiplier for your entire character sheet. You aren't just a vampire anymore, you are a super vampire running on magical steroids. But the breakage goes further with the minions. When paired with the Staff of Worms, also found in this house, which allows for a permanent dead thrall of any level, you can create an army that never despawns. You can thrall a bandit chief, equip him with the Daedric armor you smithed, and he stays with you forever. If he dies, you just use the staff again. You stop playing Skyrim as an RPG and start playing it as a squad-based tactical shooter where your squad is made of rotting meat. Now, for the obscure lore tidbit, the Bloodworm helm is the signature artifact of Manimarco, the King of Worms. Veteran players remember fighting him in Oblivion, where he was, well, let's be honest, he was a bit of a pushover in a cave, but the lore paints him as a god. He is the first Lich, the being who tricked Molag Bal, briefly, and the one who ascended to become the Necromancer's moon. The obscure fact is that the helm is composed of chemically treated bone. It's not just carved, it's cured. In the Elder Scrolls IV, the Mages Guild questline reveals that Manimarco's influence allows necromancers to create bloodworm thralls, living people whose bones are slowly turned to jelly while they are still alive. The helm is implied to be the skull of a rival necromancer that Manimarco defeated and wore as a trophy. By wearing it, the Dragonborn is effectively wearing the trophy of a god, signalling to every necromancer in Tamriel, "I am the new management." This leads to a fascinating community debate. Is Mannimarco actually dead? In Oblivion, you kill his physical form, but in Elder Scrolls Online we see him as a powerful recurring villain. Lore scholars argue that because he achieved a form of apotheosis, becoming the Revenant Moon, his physical death in Oblivion was meaningless. He is an idea now. By wearing the Bloodworm helm, are you channeling his power, or is he channeling you? Some fans theorize that the voices mentioned in the Gallows Hall quest, the ones that drove the previous owner mad, are actually Mannimarco whispering instructions. The helm isn't just a tool, it's a radio receiver tuned to the frequency of the god of worms. The Dragonborn, with their soul of a dragon, might be the only being strong enough to wear it without hearing the whispers, or maybe we just ignore them because we're too busy looting. Visually, Gallows Hall is a goth paradise. The lighting is dim purple and sick green. There are altars for creating black soul gems, a massive utility break in itself, and the storage is labelled with things like bones and flesh. It's morbidly organised. The broken aspect is most fun when you realise you can thrall unique NPCs. You can kill a powerful boss like Orchandor, who has innate magic resistance, or a vampire master, thrall them, and bring them to fight a dragon. The dragon breathes fire, your minion shrugs it off and shoots lightning back. You just stand there, wearing your skull helmet, watching the AI fight itself. It turns the Dragonborn into a commander rather than a combatant. There is a grim satisfaction in walking into a city with two thralls groaning behind you. The guards say, "That spell looks dangerous, keep your distance," but they don't stop you. They can't. You have the King of Worms on your head and a permanent army at your back. You've conquered death, or at least you've unionized it. As you step out of the dark, waterlogged fort of Mara's Eye Pond, the sunlight hits the bleached bone of the helm. It doesn't warm up, it stays cold. You check your minions, still rotting, still loyal. You have the ultimate defense, minions to take the hits, and the ultimate offense, necromage-boosted stats. But necromancy is loud, it smells, it draws attention. Sometimes to truly break the game, you don't need an army. You don't even need a body. You need to become nothing. You need to vanish so completely that the game engine forgets you are there. We are leaving the rotting dead behind and embracing the void. We are about to pick up the bow of shadows. We leave the rotting stench of the necromancer's crypt and the clattering bones of our undead army behind. While commanding a legion of the dead has its messy, chaotic charm, sometimes you don't want to be a general. You don't want to manage minions or listen to the constant groaning of thralls. Sometimes you just want the problem to go away before the problem even knows you're there. We are trading the heavy, chemical-treated bone of the Bloodworm helm for something sleek, dark, and utterly unfair to the AI of Skyrim. We are heading to the Dragon's Reach Jarl's quarters to uncover an assassination plot, but the real prize isn't saving the Jarl, it's taking the assassin's weapon. We're talking about the Bow of Shadows. Now, let's address the elephant in the room immediately, the Stealth Archer. It is the most famous, most memed, and most inevitable build in the Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim. You start a playthrough intending to be a heavy armor warrior, or a pure mage, but 5 hours later you are crouching in a corner with a bow. It happens to the best of us. The game's mechanics just naturally favour the silent shot, but usually playing a stealth archer requires some effort. You need to level your sneak skill. You need to invest in the quiet casting perk if you want to use invisibility spells. You need to manage your magicka. The Bow of Shadows looks at all the effort and laughs. The core in-game fact that makes this weapon completely broken is its enchantment. Weapon draw turns the wielder invisible for 30 seconds. Read that again. Weapon draw, not cast a spell, not drink a potion, not crouch and wait for the Shadow Warrior perk to trigger. You simply press the button to unsheath the bow and you vanish. The game engine treats this as a perfect invisibility effect. If an enemy is charging you, you draw the bow and they stop. They look around, confused, muttering, "Must have been the wind," while you're standing too, feet in front of them, lining up a shot directly into their nostril. This mechanic removes the cooldown or resource cost of stealth entirely. In a standard fight, if you break stealth, you are in trouble. You have to run away and hide. With the Bow of Shadows, if you break stealth, you just sheath the bow and draw it again. Poof! You're gone. You can toggle invisibility on and off faster than the AI can process your location. You become a ghost that flickers in and out of reality, dealing death with every flicker. But the breakage goes deeper. The Bow of Shadows isn't just a utility tool, it is a machine gun. The draw speed on this bow is roughly 20% faster than a standard bow. This puts it in competition with Zephyr, the Dwemer bow known for its speed. However, Zephyr doesn't make you invisible. The Bow of Shadows combines the highest DPS, damage per second potential of a rapid-fire bow with the absolute safety of permanent camouflage. You can put more arrows downrange, in 10 seconds than most enemies can survive, all while they are swinging at empty air. The quest to get it, in the shadows, is surprisingly tense. It involves investigating a plot to kill Jarl Balgruuf. You find a hidden assassin, an orc named Argus, living in the literal walls of Dragon's Reach. When you kill him and take the bow, you realise how he managed to stay hidden for so long. He didn't need to be good at hiding, he just needed to hold his weapon. Now for the obscure lore tidbit. The Bow of Shadows is a Daedric artifact of Nocturnal, the Daedric Prince of Night and Darkness. But unlike the Grey Cowl, which we discussed earlier, the bow has a more active history. It appeared in the Elder Scrolls 3, Morrowind and Fable of the Bow in Battlespire. The lore describes it as a weapon that grants the user speed and concealment. However, the obscure detail often missed is the price Nocturnal demands for it. In the lore book Tamrielic Artifacts, it is suggested that the Bow of Shadows eventually takes the wielder, not in the sense of eating their soul like Umbra, but in the sense of erasing their presence permanently. Legend says that many who wielded the bow eventually just faded away. They became so good at being invisible that reality forgot to make them visible again. The assassin Aergus wasn't just hiding in the walls, he might have been trapped in the obscurity the bow provided. He was a prisoner of his own stealth. This creates a chilling implication for the Dragonborn. You use the bow to clear a bandit camp effortlessly, you sheath it, and you reappear. But do you reappear completely? Or is a little piece of you left in the Shadow Realm every time? The game doesn't have a mechanic for fading away, but the lore suggests that the ultimate fate of the bow's master is to become a shadow themselves, a being that can watch but never touch. This leads to a massive community debate regarding the fun factor of the weapon. Many veteran players refuse to use the Bow of Shadows, not because it's bad, but because it is too good. It trivializes the game to a point where it feels like you are playing with developer commands enabled. The tension of stealth comes from the risk of being seen. When you remove that risk, you remove the thrill. The community often calls it the boredom bow. It is the weapon you use when you just want to finish a quest and go to bed, not when you want to experience a challenge. Others argue that it is the perfect weapon for a pacifist run, ironically. Because you can be invisible indefinitely, you can walk through an entire dungeon, bypass every enemy, grab the quest item, and leave without killing anyone. It turns Skyrim into a walking simulator where the scenery can't hurt you. Visually, the bow is gorgeous. It has a sleek black ebony design with a unique pattern etched into the limbs. When you draw it, a subtle, smoky particle effect surrounds your hands before you vanish. It feels magical. It feels like you are holding a piece of the void. The sound design is crisp, a sharp thwip that is quieter than other bows, reinforcing the stealth aesthetic. The broken aspect is most evident when fighting dragons. Usually dragons are the bane of stealth characters because they detect you easily from the air. With the Bow of Shadows, you can stand in an open field, draw the bow, and the dragon will lose track of you. It will circle overhead, confused, landing to look for you. You shoot it. It roars and turns. You sheathe and redraw. You are gone again. You can kill a legendary dragon without taking a single point of damage, playing a game of peekaboo that the dragon is destined to lose. There is also the interaction exploit. Since invisibility breaks when you interact with objects, but the bow reapplies it instantly on a redraw, you can loot chests right under a guard's nose. You open the chest, visible for 0.1 seconds, grab the loot and redraw invisible. The guard might get a "what was that" dialogue trigger, but they will never catch you. You're a poltergeist. As you stand in the Cloud District, which you get to very often now thanks to being invisible, looking down at Whiterun, you feel a strange sense of detachment. The guards patrolling below are no longer threats. They are just scenery. The dragons are just big birds. The vampires are just annoying mosquitoes. You have removed yourself from the food chain. You're observing Skyrim from behind a glass wall of shadows. But while the Bow of Shadows offers a clean, precise and controlled form of game-breaking power, there are artifacts that embrace the exact opposite philosophy. Some weapons don't want to control the battlefield, they want to turn it into a casino. We are leaving the silent, calculated world of the assassin and entering the chaotic, colourful mind of the mad god once again. We are about to pick up a bow that doesn't just shoot arrows. It shoots pure RNG. We are leaving the shadows and stepping into the madness. We are heading to Ruin's Edge. We leave the calculated, silent world of the assassin behind. The Bow of Shadows was about control. Controlling who sees you, controlling when the fight starts, controlling the very concept of presence. But control is boring. Control is for people who make spreadsheets for their character builds. Sometimes you don't want to be a ghost. You want to be a gambler. You want to walk into a bandit camp, knock an arrow, and have absolutely no idea what is going to happen when you let it fly. We're trading the sleek ebony of the void for the twitching, blinking madness of the Shivering Isles. We're heading to Stony Creek Cave, a damp hole in the ground southeast of Windhelm, to recover a weapon that proves the mad god has a wicked sense of humour about archery. We're talking about Ruin's Edge. For those who spent time in the Shivering Isles expansion for Oblivion, this weapon is a fond, if slightly disturbing, memory. It was the signature weapon of Syl, the Duchess of Dementia, a paranoid ruler who saw enemies in every shadow. In Skyrim, the bow returns via the Edge of Ruin quest. The quest itself is short. You fight a bandit chief who has claimed the bow. But the fight is often hilarious because the chief is usually the first victim of the weapon's chaotic enchantment, flailing around while the bow does something to him. The core in-game fact that defines this weapon is its complete rejection of consistency. Ruin's Edge does not have a standard enchantment. It doesn't just do 20 points of fire damage. Instead, every single shot rolls a dice on a hidden loot table of misery. One shot might inflict a blast of frost. The next might cast Demoralize, sending a mighty orc berserker running away in tears. The next might cast Frenzy, turning a disciplined Imperial soldier against his own squad. But the effect that truly breaks the game, the jackpot on this slot machine of death, is Paralyze. In the vanilla game, Paralysis is a high-tier effect. You need high alchemy to brew the poisons or high alteration to cast the spell. Ruin's Edge gives it to you for free at random on any shot, and it isn't a short paralysis. If the dice roll in your favour, a target can be petrified for up to 15 seconds. Let's look at the combat loop this creates. You are fighting a giant. Usually this is a terrifying encounter for a low-level archer. You kite, you run, you pray he doesn't launch you into the stratosphere. With Ruin's Edge, you just keep shooting. Maybe the first arrow just tickles him, maybe the second makes him green, but the third arrow paralyzes him. He falls over stiff as a board. Now you have 15 seconds of free damage. You pour arrows into him. As he starts to stand up, you shoot again. Maybe you get lucky and paralyze him again. It turns difficult boss fights into slapstick comedy. You can defeat the Ebony Warrior, Karstag, or a legendary dragon simply because the RNG gods decided that today they aren't allowed to move. It removes skill from the equation and replaces it with probability. And in a game where you can fire arrows as fast as you can click, the probability is always in your favour eventually. Visually, the bow is a masterpiece of discomfort. It doesn't look like it was made, it looks like it was grown. The limbs are dark and organic, resembling chitin or hardened muscle. But the centrepiece is the eye. Just above the grip there is a living, moving eyeball. It blinks, it looks around. When you're sneaking in a dark dungeon, the eye is watching you. It adds a layer of psychological horror to the first-person perspective. You aren't alone, your weapon is awake and it looks bored. Now, for the obscure lore tidbit. While most players know this as Syl's bow, the lore suggests that the weapon itself might be a manifestation of the Dark Seducer's philosophy. In the Shivering Isles, the Dark Seducers, Mazken, serve the House of Dementia. They value strength, but also treachery and unpredictability. The bow fits this perfectly. However, the specific enchantment effects, Burden, Paralyze, Silence, are all spells designed to limit the enemy. This contrasts sharply with the Mania side of the Isles, which focuses on excessive energy, fire, light. The obscure fact here is that Ruin's Edge is technically a tool of oppression. It doesn't kill you quickly, it strips away your ability to fight back, it silences your magic, it burdens your inventory so you can't move, or it paralyzes your muscles. It is a weapon designed by a paranoid duchess to ensure that her enemies couldn't escape her judgment. The fact that the Dragonborn, a hero of freedom, uses it to cheese fights is a delicious irony. This leads to a spirited community debate. Is Ruin's Edge just the Wabbajack for archers? The Wabbajack is the famous staff of Sheogorath that transforms enemies into sweet rolls or Dremora. Fans often compare the two. The pro-chaos faction of the community loves Ruin's Edge because it spices up the monotony of stealth archery. Why shoot him in the head when I can make him run away in fear and then shoot him in the head, they argue. It adds a narrative to every fight. Remember that bandit who got paralysed mid-jump? However, the min-max faction hates it. They argue that randomness is the enemy of efficiency. You can't plan a strategy if you don't know what your weapon will do. If you need to stop a mage from casting and you roll Demoralize instead of Silence or Shock, you might die. They view the bow as a toy, not a weapon. A dangerous toy, yes, but one that shouldn't be relied upon in a permadeath run. But the broken nature of the item wins out because of the sheer volume of fire. If you use the Quick Shot perk, you are rolling that dice 2 or 3 times a second. The law of large numbers states that eventually you will get the effect you need. It turns the Dragonborn into a chaotic force of nature. You aren't an archer, you're a conduit for the mad god's whims. There is also a subtle, almost unnoticeable interaction with the Bullseye perk, which paralyzes enemies. If you have the perk and the bow, the effects stack independently. You can essentially keep an enemy in a permanent state of I have fallen and I can't get up. It's cruel, it's unfair, and it is exactly how the Duchess of Dementia would have wanted it. As you sheath the bow, the eye gives one last blink before closing. You look at the carnage around you, bandits frozen in ice running in fear or lying stiff on the ground. It wasn't a clean fight, it was a mess. But you are alive, and they aren't. And in the Shivering Isles, that's the only punchline that matters. But chaos, for all its fun, is messy. Sometimes you don't want to roll the dice. Sometimes you want to tell the world, no. You want to draw a line in the sand that no enemy can cross. We are leaving the offensive madness of Ruin's Edge, and turning to the ultimate defensive tool. We are about to pick up a staff that doesn't shoot fire or lightning. It shoots pure rejection. We are heading to the coast to find the staff of Hasidoki. We leave the unpredictable, dice-rolling madness of the Shivering Isles and return to a concept that is far more grounded, yet infinitely more satisfying: gravity. While Ruin's Edge plays games with your enemy's status effects, our next artifact plays games with their physics. We are heading to the Western Mountain Passes, tracking a group of smugglers who are trying to move a weapon that is arguably the best defensive tool in the entire game. We are talking about the Staff of Hasidoki. Now, staves in Skyrim are generally seen as vendor trash. They are heavy, they need recharging, and they usually cast spells that you could just cast yourself if you had the magicka. But the Staff of Hasidoki is different. It isn't a stick that shoots fireballs. It is a handheld force field that rejects the very concept of personal space for anyone trying to hurt you. The quest to find it, appropriately titled The Staff of Hasidoki, takes you to Brittleshan Pass, a necromancer-infested tunnel that connects Whiterun and Falkreath. The journey involves reading smuggler notes and tracking down a courier who realise too late that this staff is cursed. When you finally claim it from the cold, dead hands of a necromancer who clearly didn't know how to use it properly, you gain access to a mechanic that is usually reserved for the Dragonborn's voice. The core in-game fact that breaks the meta is the staff's knockback effect. When you fire the staff, it projects a telekinetic bolt that deals unresistible damage and, here is the kicker, ragdolls the target. This is not a stagger. This is not a flinch. This is the full, unrelenting force shout packaged into a spammable beam. You can walk up to a giant, a creature that has been launching players into orbit since 2011, and simply tap the trigger. The giant lifts off his feet and flies backward, tumbling down the mountain like a discarded toy. And because the staff has a decent charge capacity, you can do this. Repeatedly. You can juggle him. You can keep him in the air indefinitely, denying him the dignity of ever touching the ground again. It turns the most terrifying melee enemies in the game into helpless physics objects. But the offence is only half the story. The true game-breaking nature of the Staff of Hasidoki lies in its passive defence. When you are holding the staff but not firing it, effectively blocking or just having it raised, it generates a magical ward. This isn't the flimsy, lesser ward you learn at the college. This is a high-magnitude shield that blocks up to 40 points of spell damage and adds to your armor rating. It functions similarly to the legendary shield Spellbreaker, but with a crucial difference: it's on a staff. This allows for a Gandalf playstyle where you simply walk through dragonfire. An ancient dragon bathes you in flames, and the staff just absorbs it, the ward shimmering but never breaking. You become a walking tank immune to magic and capable of yeeting melee attackers across the room. Now for the obscure lore tidbit. The Staff of Hasidoki has a tragic, almost emo backstory. As detailed in Morrowind lore, where the staff first appeared, Hasidoki was a wizard who was incredibly powerful, so powerful that he became arrogant. He travelled all of Tamriel looking for a wizard who was his equal, someone who could offer him a challenge. He never found one. Overcome with loneliness and a sense of superiority, he bound his own soul into the staff so that he would never be separated from the only person he respected, himself. This adds a dark layer to the item. You aren't just holding a piece of wood, you are holding hasidoki. The ward that protects you is likely his own ego, refusing to let lesser mages touch him. The knockback effect is his disdain, physically pushing away the unworthy. You're wielding the weaponized narcissism of an ancient wizard. This leads to a fascinating community debate: Staff of Hasidoki versus Spellbreaker. For a decade, Spellbreaker was the undisputed king of anti-magic defense. But the introduction of Hasidoki in the Creation Club challenged that throne. Fans argue that Hasidoki is superior because it allows for a spell sword build without the need for a shield. You can hold the staff in your left hand for the ward and a sword in your right, or you can dual-wield the staff and a destruction spell. The Hasidoki tank build has become a niche favourite for players playing on legendary difficulty, where getting hit by a single ice spike usually means death. There is also the pacifist argument. The staff deals very little direct damage compared to a sword. Its primary utility is the soul trap, if the target dies in 60 seconds, and the knockback. Some players use it to complete pacifist runs by simply pushing enemies off cliffs or into traps. You didn't kill the bandit chief, gravity did. Hasidoki just introduced them. Visually, the staff is distinct but understated. It looks like a twisted branch, almost organic, with a glowing crystal bound near the top. But the visual effect of the ward is the real treat. It creates a shimmering distortion in the air in front of you, a visual cue that says, magic stops here. The broken interaction really shines when you combine it with the Soul Stealer perk in the Conjuration tree. The staff has a built-in soul trap effect. If you are farming souls for enchanting, this staff is a factory. You knock an enemy down, safety. You shoot them again, damage. And when they die, you get their soul. It's a safe, efficient, and deeply cynical way to harvest the life force of Skyrim's population. But the most entertaining way to use the staff is against enemies with long wind-up animations. Draugr Deathlords trying to shout, ragdoll them, vampires trying to drain you, ward it, then ragdoll them. It interrupts everything. It turns the Dragonborn into the ultimate bully. You decide. When the fight happens, you decide where the enemy stands, usually 20 feet away, face down in the mud. As you stand at the exit of Brittleshin Pass, watching a mudcrab fly into the sunset because you misclicked, you realise that Hasidoki might have been lonely, but he certainly knew how to keep people at a distance. You have the ultimate tool for rejection, but gravity and wards are clean forces. They are invisible. To end our journey, to truly break the game in the most visceral way possible, we need something messy. We need something that crackles, something that shocks, and something that hits with the weight of a falling moon. We are heading to our final destination, to the root systems of the Saints and Seducers, to find a hammer that brings the storm down to earth. We are about to pick up Nerveshatter. We leave the coast and the calculated rejection of Hasidoki behind. While pushing enemies away with a magical force field is satisfying in a detached, wizardly sort of way, sometimes you just need to close the distance. Sometimes, the only way to truly break the game is to hit something so hard that the physics engine briefly forgets how to render the impact. We are heading into the sewers beneath Solitude, traversing the alien, root-choked tunnels of the Saints and Seducers creation to find the final artifact in our collection. We are looking for the heaviest hitter in the Shivering Isles arsenal. We are talking about Nerveshatter. For those who walked the bizarre, fungal landscape of the Shivering Isles in Oblivion, this weapon is an old friend. It was the signature weapon of Syl, the paranoia-riddled Duchess of Dementia. In Skyrim, it rests deep within the root system, a dungeon that feels like a fever dream of glowing plants and twisted roots hidden beneath the mundane stone of the capital city. When you finally claim it from its pedestal, surrounded by the buzzing of elytra nymphs, you're holding a warhammer that doesn't just crush bone, it scrambles the nervous system of anything it touches. The core in-game fact that elevates Nerveshatter from a cool hammer to a game-breaking artifact is its unique enchantment loop. Nerveshatter deals shock damage, that's standard enough, but it also applies a weakness to shock effect for a few seconds. Let's break down the math of this violence. The first swing hits the enemy with massive physical damage. It has one of the highest base damage stats of any warhammer in the game, rivaling Dragonborn, plus the shock damage. But that first hit also applies the weakness. This means your second swing deals the physical damage, the shock damage, and a percentage bonus to that shock damage because the enemy is now allergic to electricity. If you are swinging fast enough, perhaps using the elemental, Fury Shout or a potion of fortify attack speed, the damage stacks exponentially. You are creating a feedback loop of pain where every hit makes the target softer for the next one. This trivializes boss fights against enemies with high health pools but low magic resistance. A Dragon Priest, usually a formidable foe, gets caught in this loop. The shock damage drains their magicka, preventing them from casting, while the physical damage crushes their fragile cloth armor. Nerveshatter turns the ultimate mages of Skyrim into panic-stricken victims who can't cast and can't tank. But the breakage goes beyond just numbers. Nerveshatter interacts beautifully with the augmented shock perk in the destruction tree. Even though it is a two-handed weapon, the enchantment scales with your destruction skill. If you invest in both two-handed, for the physical smash, and destruction, for the zap, you are effectively double-dipping into two different damage pools. You become a battle mage, who doesn't cast spells. You just deliver them via blunt force trauma. Now, for the obscure lore tidbit. Nerveshatter is forged from amber, a material native to the Shivering Isles. In the lore, amber is formed from the resin of trees that grow in the manic distinct of the Isles. However, Nerveshatter was wielded by the Duchess of Dementia. This is a subtle environmental storytelling detail that many miss. It implies that Syl, despite ruling the dark, brooding court of Dementia, relied on a weapon made from the substance of her rival court, Mania. Why? The lore suggests that amber absorbs magic. In the Shivering Isles expansion, amber armor and weapons were prized for their conductive properties. By wielding a hammer made of mania, amber, but enchanted with the cruelty of dementia, shock/weakness, Syl was essentially weaponizing the duality of the mad god's realm. She was hitting you with the entire spectrum of madness at once. The Dragonborn, by picking it up, is inheriting this chaotic synthesis. You aren't just swinging a rock, you're swinging a solidified paradox. This leads to a spirited community debate, Nerveshatter versus Volendrung. For years, Volendrung, the Daedric artifact of Malakath, was the undisputed king of warhammers due to its ridiculous absorb stamina enchantment, which allowed for infinite power attacks. Fans argue that Volendrung offers better utility/sustain. However, the damage kings of the community argue that Nerveshatter offers higher burst DPS, damage per second. Against a dragon that needs to die now, Nerveshatter wins. Against a horde of bandits where you need stamina to keep swinging, Volendrung wins. The debate often settles on aesthetic preference. Volendrung looks like a proper, gritty Dwemer/Daedric hammer. Nerveshatter looks like a giant glowing lollipop made of rock candy. Some players refuse to use it because it clashes with their rugged Nord aesthetic. It's hard to look tough in for armor when you're holding a bright orange crystal hammer. But others embrace the absurdity. Walking into the Blue Palace with a weapon that glows like a neon sign is the ultimate power move. It says, I don't care about your dress code, I have the highest base damage in the game. The broken aspect is finalized when you consider the stagger mechanic. Warhammers have a perk called Skull Crusher that ignores armor, but they also have the highest stagger chance. When you combine the heavy stagger of a warhammer with the magicka drain of the shock damage, you create a state of stun lock. The enemy can't move because they are staggered. They can't cast because they have no magicka. They can't heal because they are dead. It is a complete shutdown of the enemy AI. Visually, the hammer is stunning in the dark. In the gloom of a Nordic ruin, the amber head glows with a soft internal light. When it strikes, electric arcs jump from the head to the target, illuminating the room in harsh blue flashes. It feels powerful. The sound design is a heavy crunch followed by the sizzle of ozone. It satisfies the lizard brain of every warrior player. As you stand in the Solitude sewers, the Golden Saints and Dark Seducers defeated around you, Nerveshatter rests heavy in your hands. You have conquered the madness. You have taken the best weapons the Shivering Isles, the Deadlands, and the ancient Dwemer had to offer. You're no longer just the Dragonborn. You're a walking museum of game-breaking artifacts. The balance of Skyrim is gone. You broke it, and honestly, it was fun. No, wait, that was the final section. Now, we wind down. The hammer feels heavy, doesn't it? Not just Nerveshatter, but the weight of all 15 artifacts we've collected tonight. From the shifting colours of Dawnfang to the dark hunger of Umbra. From the golden fire of the Emperor's sword to the silent, deadly grace of the Bow of Shadows. We have travelled from the deepest roots of the Solitude sewers to the highest peaks of the Gerald Mountains. We have opened gates to oblivion and closed them again. We have tricked Daedra, outsmarted necromancers, and robbed the Khajiit caravans blind. You can imagine your character now, can't you? Standing there in the middle of a quiet tundra, the Aurora Borealis dancing overhead, green and purple ribbons of light that mirror the enchantments in your inventory. You are safe. You are undeniably, mathematically safe. No bandit can touch you. No dragon can burn you. You have the tools of gods in your backpack. There is a profound peace in that kind of power. It's not about the violence anymore. It's about the certainty. You don't have to worry about what's around the next corner because you know you have the answer to it hanging on your hip. You can finally just walk. You can listen to the wind howling through the mountain passes. You can watch the moons, Massa and Secunda, track their slow path across the stars. The urgency of the quest is fading now. The civil war can wait. Alduin can wait. The vampires, the cultists, the mad gods, they are all quiet. The game is paused in your mind. The inventory is sorted. The loot is secured. You've done enough for one night, adventurer. You've gathered the legends, you've read the books, and you've broken the rules just enough to make the world your own. Now, the fire in the hearth is dying down to embers. The music is fading into that soft ambient hum of a safe zone. Rest now. The save file is there. The world will be exactly where you left it when you wake up. Sweet dreams.